Most people assume vegetables always grow better in the ground. More dirt, more roots, more food. That's the belief. But surprisingly, some vegetables actually grow faster, healthier, and heavier in a simple pot on your porch than they ever would in a big backyard plot. And no, this isn't about having a green thumb. It isn't about expensive equipment or grow lights or some complicated system somebody is trying to sell you. It's about choosing the right plants, because a handful of vegetables are practically built for containers. They love the tight roots. They love the warm soil. They explode with growth in a way that surprises even people who've been gardening for 30 years. Right now, somewhere out there, somebody is staring at a tiny balcony thinking they can't grow real food. Somebody else is spending money every single week at the store on vegetables they could be picking outside their own door. The space is there. The pots are there. The only thing missing is knowing which plants reward you the most. So today, we're counting down 8 vegetables that grow like crazy in pots. We'll go from number 8 all the way down to number 1. And stay with me until the end, because the number 1 plant on this list can keep feeding you for years from a single planting. And almost nobody puts it in a container, even though it might be the most perfect pot vegetable that exists. Before we start, do one small thing. Drop your growing zone or your state in the comments and tell me which way your balcony or porch faces, south, north, east, or west. It only takes a second, and it'll help you figure out exactly which of these 8 will thrive for you. All right, let's get started. At number 8, we have lettuce, and most people picture lettuce as something fussy, something that wilts the moment the sun gets hot, something for experienced gardeners with perfect timing. But here's the truth. Lettuce is one of the most forgiving, fast, and generous plants you can grow, and a pot is honestly the best home it could ask for. Here's why it works so well. Lettuce has shallow roots. It doesn't dig deep looking for water the way a tomato does. It spreads out near the surface just a few inches down, which means a wide, shallow container is perfect. You don't need a deep pot. You don't need much soil at all. A simple window box, a plastic tub, even an old dish pan with a few holes drilled in the bottom will grow more lettuce than you can eat. And here's the part that surprises people. When you grow lettuce in a pot, you control the soil temperature. In the ground, lettuce roots cook when the summer heat moves in, and the plant bolts, which means it shoots up tall, turns bitter, and stops being good to eat. But in a container, you can simply slide it into the shade on a hot afternoon. You move the whole plant. Try doing that with a garden bed. The trick that makes lettuce grow like crazy is the way you harvest it. Don't pull up the whole plant. Instead, pick the outer leaves, the older ones on the edges, and leave the center growing. This is called cut and come again. The plant keeps pushing new leaves from the middle, and a single lettuce plant can feed you for weeks, sometimes a month or more. The University of Minnesota Extension recommends this exact method for leaf lettuce because the center crown keeps producing as long as you keep picking gently. Give it morning sun, keep the soil damp but never soggy, and you'll have fresh salad just steps from your kitchen. But lettuce is just the warm-up because the next plant on our list grows so fast you can practically watch it happen. At number 7, we have radishes. And this one is for anyone who thinks they're too impatient to garden. Most people give up because they plant something and wait, and nothing seems to happen. Radishes fix that completely. From seed to harvest, many radish varieties take just 3 to 4 weeks, 25 days. That's it. Now here's what most people don't realize about radishes in pots. They actually grow straighter and cleaner in a container than in the ground. In a typical backyard, the soil is full of rocks, clumps, and hard-packed clay. When a radish root hits any of that, it forks, it twists, it grows into a strange knotted shape. But in a pot filled with loose, fluffy potting mix, the root slides straight down with nothing in its way. You get those perfect, round, crisp radishes, the kind you'd pay good money for at a farmer's market. They don't need much room either. A pot just 6 inches deep is plenty for most radishes. You can tuck them into the edges of other containers in the gaps around bigger plants because they're done and harvested before the big plants even need the space. Gardeners call this succession planting, and radishes are the perfect crop for it. The most common mistake people make is planting the seeds too close together. When radishes are crowded, they spend all their energy growing leaves and never form a good root. So give each seed about 2 inches of space, thin them out if you have to, and don't feel bad about it. That little bit of breathing room is the difference between a leafy disappointment and a bowl full of crunchy radishes. Water them steadily, because if the soil dries out and then gets soaked again, the roots can crack or turn spicy and woody. Keep it even, keep it simple, and in under a month you'll be pulling food out of a pot. But speed is one thing. The next vegetable on our list gives you something even better. It just keeps giving, again and again, all season long. At number 6, we have bush beans. And most people assume beans need a big sprawling garden with long rows and tall trellises and a lot of room to climb. That's true for pole beans. But bush beans are a different story entirely, and they're one of the best kept secrets in container gardening. Bush beans stay compact. They grow into a tidy little plant, usually knee-high, that holds itself up without any support. No trellis, no netting, no poles. You just plant them in a pot and let them do their thing. A container about 12 inches wide and 10 inches deep will hold several plants, and that little cluster can produce handful after handful of fresh beans. Here's the science that makes beans special, and it's something every gardener should understand. Beans are part of a family called legumes, and legumes do something almost magical. They pull nitrogen right out of the air and feed it into the soil through their roots with the help of tiny bacteria that live on those roots. Nitrogen is the nutrient that makes plants grow green and lush. So beans, in a sense, fertilize themselves. That's why they grow so vigorously even in a simple pot, and it's why they need less feeding than almost anything else you can grow. When you grow bush beans in a container, you also dodge one of the biggest headaches gardeners face, which is soil-borne disease. In the ground, beans can pick up problems that live in the dirt year after year. But with fresh potting mix in a clean pot, you start with a blank slate every season. Less disease, less worry, more beans. The key to keeping them producing is to pick often. The more you harvest, the more the plant makes. If you leave the pods on too long, the plant thinks its job is done and slows down. So pick them young and tender every couple of days, and the plant will keep cranking out beans for weeks. Give them full sun, 6 hours or more, and water when the top inch of soil feels dry. Now, if you've been gardening in the ground for years, you might be thinking, none of this applies to you. You've already got your beds, your rows, your routine. But here's something you can do this very weekend with nothing but a spare pot. Take your weakest performing crop, the one that struggles in your garden soil every single year, and grow just one of it in a container instead. Use fresh potting mix. Set it where it gets the best light. You'll be able to compare side by side how much the soil and the drainage were holding that plant back. A lot of longtime gardeners are shocked when the potted version outgrows the one in the ground. It costs you almost nothing, and it might change how you grow that vegetable forever. And speaking of plants that outperform their reputation, the next one on our list is something most people are absolutely convinced needs deep ground. They're wrong. If you want to go even deeper into exactly which varieties, which pot sizes, and which planting sequences get the heaviest yields from the smallest spaces, I put all of that into a guide called the Container Harvest. It covers everything we're talking about today and a lot more laid out in plain language so you can actually use it this weekend. It's available for $97 and the link is in the description below. A lot of people tell me it changed how they think about the space they already have. But as good as carrots are, the next vegetable might be the single most rewarding thing you can grow in a small space. At number 5, we have carrots. And this is the one that surprises people the most. Most folks picture carrots growing deep underground, long roots stretching way down, needing soft, deep soil that a pot just can't provide. So they assume carrots and containers don't mix. But the opposite is true. Containers often produce better carrots than the ground ever could. Think about what a carrot actually needs. It needs loose, soft, stone-free soil so the root can grow long and straight without hitting anything. Most backyard soil is the exact opposite. It's heavy, it's compacted, it's full of rocks and clay. That's why so many homegrown carrots come out short, stubby, forked, or twisted into shapes that look almost cartoonish. The carrot wasn't the problem. The soil was. In a deep pot filled with light, fluffy potting mix, the carrot has nothing standing in its way. It slides straight down into that soft soil and grows long and smooth. All you need is a container at least 10 to 12 inches deep. And there are shorter carrot varieties, the little round ones and the stubby non-types that do beautifully in even shallower pots. Here's a tip that solves the most common carrot frustration. Carrot seeds are tiny, almost like dust, and people tend to dump way too many in one spot. Then the carrots come up in a tangled mat, all crowded together, and none of them can size up. So sprinkle them thinly. And once the little green tops are a couple inches tall, thin them so each carrot has about 2 inches of room. I know it feels wasteful to pull up healthy seedlings. Do it anyway. That space is what lets each carrot grow into a full-size root instead of a skinny thread. And here's something lovely about growing carrots in a pot. You can leave them in the ground, so to speak, right up until you want them. Carrots actually get sweeter after a light frost because the cold tells the plant to convert its starches into sugar to protect itself. So as the weather cools, your potted carrots turn candy sweet. You just pull them as you need them, fresh and crisp. But as good as carrots are, the next vegetable might be the single most rewarding thing you can grow in a small space. At number 4, we have tomatoes. And I know what you might be thinking. Tomatoes get huge. They sprawl everywhere. Surely they need a real garden. But here's the surprising truth that experienced growers know well. Some of the best tomatoes in the world are grown in pots. And a container can actually give you healthier plants and cleaner fruit than a garden bed. The reason comes down to control. Tomatoes are heavy feeders and they're picky about water. In the ground, they're at the mercy of whatever the weather and the soil hand them. Too much rain and the fruit cracks or the plant gets disease. Poor soil and they sulk. But in a pot, you control everything. You control the soil quality, you control the watering, and you keep the plant up off the ground away from the soil splash that spreads so many tomato diseases. The single most important thing with potted tomatoes is the size of the container. This is where most people go wrong. They use a pot that's too small, and the plant dries out every afternoon and never reaches its potential. For a full-size tomato, you want a big container, at least 5 gallons, and bigger is better. A large pot holds more soil, which holds more water and more nutrients, which means a stronger, more productive plant. If you only have room for one big pot, make it a tomato. Now, if you're tight on space, look for varieties labeled determinate or bush or patio. These stay more compact and don't vine endlessly. There are even tiny tomato varieties bred specifically for hanging baskets and window boxes, dripping with little sweet fruits. For the bigger ones, give them a stake or a cage when you plant them, not later, so the plant grows up into the support instead of flopping over. Feed them because tomatoes are hungry. A balanced fertilizer through the season keeps them producing. Water deeply and consistently, ideally in the morning, and try to keep the water off the leaves to avoid disease. When the soil feels dry an inch down, it's time. One more trick. When you plant your tomato seedling, bury it deep, right up to the top few leaves. Tomatoes can grow roots all along their buried stem, so a deeply planted seedling builds a bigger, stronger root system and a sturdier plant. That single move gives you a noticeably tougher tomato. But here's where it gets interesting. The next plant on our list isn't grown for its fruit at all. It's grown for its leaves. And it might be the most generous vegetable you'll ever put in a pot. At number 3, we have spinach and its cousins in the leafy green family, like Swiss chard and kale. Most people think of leafy greens as a cool weather crop that's hard to time, right here for a moment and then gone. But in a container, leafy greens become one of the most productive and long-lasting things you can grow. And they thrive in conditions that would disappoint a lot of other vegetables. Here's the surprising part. Leafy greens don't need full blazing sun. In fact, they often prefer a little shade, especially in the warmer months. That makes them perfect for those tricky spots. The balcony that only gets morning light, the patio that's shaded by a building half the day, the north-facing corner where you thought nothing would grow. While tomatoes and peppers are begging for sun, your greens are perfectly happy with 4 to 5 hours, and too much heat just makes them bolt and turn bitter. Because their roots are shallow like lettuce, they grow well in wide, shallow containers. And here's where the magic happens. Just like with lettuce, you harvest the outer leaves and let the center keep growing. With Swiss chard especially, a single plant can keep producing leaves for months. You pick, it regrows, you pick again.
The University of Minnesota Extension notes that chard will keep producing right up until a hard freeze, and the colorful stems make it one of the prettiest things on a porch. Kale takes this even further.
Kale is tough. It shrugs off cold that would kill most plants, and like carrots, it actually gets sweeter after frost. People in cold climates harvest kale from pots well into winter, brushing snow off the leaves. For pure return on a tiny bit of effort, leafy greens are hard to beat. A few plants in a couple of pots can put fresh greens on your table almost every week for an entire season. The mistake to avoid is letting them dry out. Shallow roots dry quickly, so these pots need a consistent drink, especially on warm days. Keep the soil evenly moist. Give the leaves room to breathe so they don't stay wet and moldy, and they'll reward you again and again. But generous as greens are, the next vegetable on our list grows so fast and so freely that one packet of seeds can feed you all summer. At number 2, we have peppers, And this is one of those plants where the container doesn't just work, it genuinely helps the plant do better. Most people assume peppers need long, hot summers and lots of ground space to really produce. But peppers have a secret. They love having warm roots, and a pot in the sun is the warmest, happiest home a pepper plant could find. Here's the science. Peppers come from warm climates, and their roots want to stay toasty. In the ground, soil stays cooler and takes longer to warm up in spring, which slows the plant down. But a container sitting in the sun heats up faster and stays warmer, and that warmth is exactly what a pepper craves. The plant gets going earlier, grows faster, and sets more fruit. Dark-colored pots soak up even more heat, giving the roots an extra boost. It's one of the few cases where a pot beats the ground for a reason rooted right in the plant's biology. Peppers also stay relatively compact, which makes them ideal for small spaces. A single plant in a 3 to 5 gallon pot can produce dozens of peppers over a season. Whether it's sweet bell peppers, crunchy and colorful, or hot peppers like jalapenos and cayennes that dangle like little ornaments, they're as pretty as they are productive. Some people grow them just for how good they look on a balcony, and the food is a bonus. The care is simple. Give them full sun, the most you've got, at least 6 to 8 hours. Water steadily, but let the top of the soil dry a little between waterings, because peppers don't like soggy feet. And here's a tip that boosts your harvest. When the first few flowers appear very early, while the plant is still small, pinch them off. It feels backward, but it tells the plant to put its energy into growing bigger and stronger first, so that when it does fruit, it can carry a much heavier load. A bigger plant means a bigger harvest later. One more thing about peppers. The more sun and warmth they get, the sweeter the sweet ones become, and the hotter the hot ones get. That heat in a jalapeno comes from a bit of stress. So a sunny pot on a hot patio can give you peppers with real character. They store and freeze well too. So a couple of productive plants can flavor your cooking long after the season ends. And that brings us to number 1. The vegetable that grows like absolute crazy in a pot, the one almost nobody thinks to container grow, even though it might be the most perfectly suited plant of them all. After a single planting, it can feed you for years. At number 1, we have asparagus. Now, stay with me, because I know the common wisdom. Everyone says asparagus needs a permanent garden bed, that you plant it once and wait years, that it takes up space forever, and that it's far too much commitment for a pot. That belief is exactly why so few people try it. But here's the surprising truth. Asparagus can grow beautifully in a large container, and once it's established, it comes back on its own every single spring with almost no work from you. Think about what that means. Most vegetables you replant every year. You buy seeds, you start over, you nurse them along, season after season. Asparagus is different. It's a perennial. You plant the crowns once in a deep, roomy container, and then each spring those tender green spears push up out of the soil all by themselves. A well cared for asparagus planting can keep producing for 15 years or more. 15 years from one planting. There is almost nothing else in the vegetable world that gives you that. Here's why a container actually solves asparagus's biggest problems. Asparagus hates wet feet. The number 1 killer of asparagus is soggy soil that rots the crown. In many backyards, the soil drains poorly and the planting slowly dies. But a large pot with good drainage holes gives asparagus exactly the well-drained home it wants, and you control the soil completely. You also keep it contained. because in the ground, asparagus spreads and can take over. In a pot, it stays exactly where you put it. You'll want a big, deep container for this, something like a half barrel or a large tub, at least 18 inches deep, because the root system, called the crown, needs room to settle in. Fill it with a light, well-draining mix. Plant your asparagus crowns in early spring, setting them down in the soil with the roots spread out like a little octopus. And here is the part that takes patience, the part the research is very clear about. You do not harvest the first year and barely the second. According to extension guidance from universities like Michigan State and Penn State, you let those first spears grow into tall, ferny foliage instead of cutting them. That foliage is the plant building up energy in the crown, like charging a battery. Let it charge for a season or two, and from then on you'll get a steady harvest every spring for over a decade. When harvest time finally comes, you simply snap or cut the spears when they're about the thickness of your finger and 6 to 8 inches tall before the tips open up. You harvest for a few weeks in spring, then let the rest grow into ferns again to recharge the crown for next year. Feed it once a year, keep it watered through the growing season, and protect the pot from freezing solid in the harshest winters by moving it against the house or wrapping it. That's it. The plant does the rest, year after year after year. That's why asparagus earns the #1 spot. It's the closest thing to planting once and harvesting forever, and almost nobody realizes you can do it in a container on a patio, a single pot tucked in a sunny corner, quietly sending up gourmet spears every spring while you do nothing but wait. It rewards patience like no other vegetable, and once it's going, it asks for almost nothing in return. So let's bring it all together. We started with lettuce, fast and forgiving, then radishes, ready in under a month, bush beans that feed themselves nitrogen from the air, carrots that grow straighter in a pot than in rocky ground, tomatoes that thrive when you control their water, leafy greens that pump out harvest after harvest from a shady corner, peppers that love warm pots more than cool earth, and asparagus, the patient perennial that pays you back for 15 years. Here's the quiet lesson under all of it. Successful gardening was never really about having more land or working harder. It's about using the space you have intelligently and choosing the plants that are built to thrive in it. A few well-chosen pots in the right spots can genuinely outproduce a big neglected garden. The goal isn't perfection, it's consistency. A little water, a little sun, the right plant in the right container, and food shows up at your door week after week. If you'd rather grow real food simply in the space you actually have, instead of overspending or breaking your back for it, then this way of gardening was made for you. You don't need acres. You don't need a fortune in equipment. You need a sunny corner and a handful of the right plants. So tell me, which of these 8 are you going to start with this weekend? Drop it in the comments along with your growing zone or your state and which way your balcony or porch faces so we can figure out together what'll grow best for you. Don't just think it, actually type it out. I read them, and other gardeners near you will see it too. And if you'd like to keep growing more with less, consider sticking around, because this is a calm little community of people who'd rather grow food simply than chase complicated systems. Next time, we're looking at the everyday kitchen scraps you can replant on a windowsill to grow free food again and again from vegetables you already bought. One of them regrows in a glass of water in just a few days. Until then, find your sunniest corner, pick one pot, and plant something. Your future self will. We just walked through all 8. But here in the circle, I take it further with the container garden plan for every one, picking up right where we stopped. Inside, you can ask me your own growing question, and a real person, me, answers you myself, and you won't be alone. You'll belong here with us. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. You can cancel anytime, one click. Now, if you love these, wait until you see the next one. I'll show you 15 vegetables and herbs that actually do better in containers than in the ground. It's starting right here, so stay with me.